That Michael Jackson, 50 years old, the king of pop, has died. A very, very sad moment.
Superior Court of California, Los Angeles County. The people of the state of California plaintiff versus Conrad Robert Murray, defendant. Case number SA073164. Title of court and cause. We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter in violation of Penal Code Section 192, subsection B. Alleged victim, Michael Joseph Jackson, alleged date of June 25th, 2009, as charged in count 1 of the information.
Catherine Jackson versus AEG Live, case number BC 445597. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. Did AEG Live hire Dr. Conrad Murray? Answer, yes. If you answered no to question 1, please sign and return this verdict form to the court. If you answered yes for question number 1, please go to question number 2. Question number 2. Was Dr. Conrad Murray unfit or incompetent to perform the work for which he was hired? Answer, no. If you answered no to question number 2, please sign and return this verdict form to the court. If you answered yes to question number 2, please go to question number 3.
Michael Jackson died not because of an isolated, one-off occurrence or incident. He died because of a totality of circumstances which are directly attributable to Dr. Murray. Not some mistake or some accident in the early morning hours of June 25th, 2009, but because of a series of decisions that Dr. Murray made which jeopardized his patient. Dr. Murray created a set of circumstances and became involved in a cycle of horrible medicine. The practice of propofol for medicine madness, which violated his sworn obligation for money, fame, prestige, and whatever else may have occurred. So I don't look to one isolated incident in terms of the misdeeds of Dr. Murray or the deeds of Dr. Murray. Dr. Murray engaged in a recurring, continuous pattern of deceit, of lies, and regrettably, that pattern was to assist Dr. Murray. It is almost inconceivable that Dr. Murray would have persisted in this pattern over such an extensive period of time. The lies, the deceit began and continued, as we heard, for 6 weeks' worth of testimony, to build up an absolutely astounding set of circumstances. He stands convicted of the death of another human being. And that death is predicated not on simple civil negligence, but on criminal negligence. And it's important for the court to realize that that is the appropriate standard. The standard of criminal or gross negligence, and the fact that a jury of 12 people from remarkably different backgrounds and life experiences concluded unanimously and beyond a reasonable doubt that Dr. Murray had, with criminal negligence, caused the death of Michael Jackson. It's important to emphasize the standard of criminal negligence found by this jury beyond a reasonable doubt, because some may feel this was a medical malpractice case. It wasn't. It was and is a criminal homicide case. And this jury found beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, with criminal negligence, caused the death of Michael Jackson. And criminal negligence is defined as follows. Criminal negligence involves more than ordinary carelessness, inattention, or mistake in judgment. A person acts or fails to perform a legal duty with criminal negligence when, 1, he or she acts or fails to perform a legal duty in a reckless way that creates a high risk of death or great bodily injury. And 2, a reasonable person would have known that acting or failing to perform a legal duty in that way would create such a risk. The unconscionable lies to healthcare providers, lifesavers, paramedics, and medical personnel at UCLA, which were not designed to help his patient, quite the contrary, which were designed to deceive and give Dr. Murray a way out. The lies from the inception of his medical relationship at the Holmby Hills residence in terms of ordering propofol in staggering quantities, unprecedented quantities. The lies to the pharmacy and to the pharmacist. The sophisticated, intentional deception in that regard. Of everything I heard and saw during the course of the trial, one aspect of the evidence stands out the most, and that is the surreptitious recording of Michael Jackson by his trusted doctor. And I have repeatedly asked myself, why did this happen, and for what reason? And I can speculate and surmise that there might have been some justifiable reason, some benefit to Michael Jackson, that would be an entirely unreasonable conclusion. That tape recording was Dr. Murray's insurance policy. It was designed to record his patient surreptitiously at that patient's most vulnerable point. Can't even imagine that happening to any of us because of the horrific violation of trust. And I can't help but wonder that if there had been some conflict between Michael Jackson and Dr. Murray at a later point in time in their relationship, what value would be placed on that tape recording? If the choice were to release that tape recording to a media organization to be used against Michael Jackson. But I also acknowledge that he unquestionably violated the trust and confidence of his patient, Mr. Jackson, on a repeated nightly basis. Michael Jackson, as a patient, was vulnerable because Dr. Murray put Mr. Jackson in a position where Dr. Murray was responsible for the very life of Mr. Jackson. Dr. Murray engaged in a sophisticated scheme to obtain propofol through insidious means by lying to the pharmacist, to concoct a story, by not keeping records. A person acts with criminal negligence when the way he or she acts is so different from the way an ordinarily careful person would act in the same situation that his or her act amounts to disregard for human life or indifference to the consequences of that act. It's important to remember and focus on those terms and not to treat them cavalierly, as some might, by saying, oh well, it just happened. And oh well, if it weren't for Dr. Murray, someone else may have been involved. I categorically disassociate myself from those types of statements. This is not a question about what might have happened or what if someone else had been involved if not for Dr. Murray. That is an insult to the medical profession. The fact is that Michael Jackson died because of the actions of and the failures to perform legal duties on the part of Dr. Murray. I can't say that my opinion changed after I became aware of the production involving Dr. Murray after the jury verdict in this case. When Dr. Murray says, I don't feel guilty, that's what he says. Wherein Dr. Murray says, I don't feel guilty, I wasn't reckless, I didn't tell him about propofol because they never asked the question, and it wasn't important. And where Dr. Murray at that point says he feels betrayed and entrapped by Michael Jackson. Yikes! Talk about blaming the victim. Not only isn't there any remorse, there's umbrage and outrage on the part of Dr. Murray against the decedent without any indication of the slightest involvement in this case. Anybody who takes an objective view of what was going on here has to come to an ineluctable conclusion that Dr. Murray abandoned his patient. And this is not a simple one-off occurrence. This is an unacceptable, egregious series of departures from the appropriate standard of care, which undermine the physician-patient relationship and which are a disgrace to the medical profession. So we're not talking about a single isolated mistake. What we're talking about is a gross, continuing deviation. This court does not have the legal authority to actually send and imprison Dr. Murray in state prison. The legislature of this state signed a realignment act that declares certain offenses, while felonies, not to be served in state prison, and involuntary manslaughter is one of those. I must determine the appropriate sentence, and in making that determination, the court is guided by a triad of possible sentences that the court can impose: 2, 3, or 4 years. The court no longer has to weigh what are called aggravating circumstances or factors versus mitigating circumstances or factors, but has to give a statement of reasons. The court has determined that the appropriate term is the high term of 4 years imprisonment. I do so because, once again, I find that Dr. Murray abandoned his patient who was trusting him. His patient was vulnerable under those circumstances, having been administered potentially dangerous drugs by his medical provider. Dr. Murray's course of conduct extended over a period of time. Dr. Murray repeatedly lied, engaged in deceitful misconduct, and endeavored to cover up his transgressions. He violated the trust of the medical community, of his colleagues, and of his patient. And he has absolutely no sense of remorse, absolutely no sense of fault, and is and remains dangerous. The fact remains, Dr. Murray is offended by that patient dying. And I don't have any idea what will prompt Dr. Murray to do or not do something in the future that may be dangerous to a patient. If he does practice medicine in the United States or even elsewhere, I think Dr. Murray is so reckless, based upon the law and the definition of criminal negligence that I read, and everything that I heard and saw in this case, and Dr. Murray's subsequent conduct, that I believe he's a danger to the community. It's easy to say, oh, well, Dr. Murray's a medical doctor. He's a smart, sophisticated man. He does not have a criminal history. He may not be licensed to practice medicine in the future, although there's a fundamental aspect of the criminal justice system which is involved here, and that is the fundamental aspect of punishment. It should be made very clear that experimental medicine is not going to be tolerated. And Mr. Jackson was an experiment. The fact that he participated in it does not excuse or lessen the blame of Dr. Murray, who simply could have walked away and said no. Dr. Murray was intrigued by the prospect and he engaged in this money for medicine madness that is simply not going to be tolerated by me. So as to sentencing in this case, the request for probation is denied. The court imposes the high term of 4 years imprisonment in this case.